What happens when one of Hollywood's most intense and dedicated stars sits down for what should be a routine promotional interview, only to find himself trapped in a verbal ambush by daytime television's most relentless host? The legendary Tom Cruise, known for his unwavering professionalism and iconic action roles, walked onto the set expecting to discuss his latest Mission Impossible project, but instead found himself facing off against Joy Behar's aggressive questioning that pushed the superstar past his breaking point. What started as typical Hollywood promotional banter quickly spiraled into a heated confrontation that had audience members on the edge of their seats and production staff desperately trying to regain control. The tension became so explosive that Cruise did something unprecedented in his decades-long career, something that left millions of viewers absolutely stunned. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this fiery clash will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about celebrity interviews. You're about to witness one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history. Tom Cruise, a man who has built his legendary career on unwavering professionalism and total dedication to his craft, was about to face something that would push him beyond his breaking point. The superstar who has spent decades maintaining perfect composure in thousands of interviews, who has faced down the most aggressive entertainment journalists with his trademark intensity and charm, was about to encounter a host who seemed more interested in destroying him than interviewing him. What happened on this particular morning at The View would become the stuff of television legend. This wasn't just another awkward celebrity interview or a simple disagreement about a film project. This was a calculated ambush disguised as journalism, a verbal assault that would push one of Hollywood's most controlled performers into doing something completely unprecedented in his four-decade career. Tom Cruise has always been known for his incredible work ethic, his death-defying stunts, and his absolute commitment to giving audiences the best possible experience. He's the guy who hangs from helicopters, scales buildings, and performs impossible action sequences because he believes in authenticity. But there's one thing that even Mission Impossible couldn't prepare him for: Joy Behar's relentless determination to tear him down on national television. The View studio had hosted hundreds of celebrity guests over the years, but none of them had ever experienced what was about to happen to Tom Cruise. What you're about to see will change everything you thought you knew about the boundaries of celebrity journalism and the responsibility that comes with having a national platform. Trust me, after witnessing this explosive confrontation, you'll never look at daytime television the same way again. The morning sun streamed through the windows of ABC's Manhattan studios as Tom Cruise arrived with his characteristic high-energy enthusiasm. The superstar bounded through the backstage corridors with that unmistakable Tom Cruise intensity, greeting every crew member he encountered with genuine warmth and his trademark megawatt smile. His publicist walked alongside him, briefing him on the standard talking points about his latest Mission Impossible project, completely unaware that this would be anything but a standard promotional appearance. Tom, they'll probably want to talk about the helicopter stunts and the training regimen, his publicist mentioned as they approached the green room. Keep it light, focus on the film, and you'll be out of here in 15 minutes. Cruise nodded enthusiastically, his eyes already lighting up at the prospect of discussing the death-defying sequences he had spent months perfecting. This was his element, talking about the craft he loved, the dedication required to bring authentic action to the screen. He had done this routine hundreds of times before, charming audiences with stories of his commitment to practical effects and real stunts. The makeup artist commented on his energy as she touched up his appearance. "You never seem to age, Mr. Cruise. What's your secret?" she asked with a laugh. "Passion for the work," he replied with genuine enthusiasm. "When you love what you do, it shows." The studio lights blazed hot as Cruise made his entrance to thunderous applause from the View's live audience. His signature wave and that infectious smile filled the studio with energy as he settled into the guest chair, his entire demeanor radiating the professional charm that had made him one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. Everything felt perfectly normal. The audience was excited, the other hosts were smiling, and Cruise was in his element, ready to share his passion for filmmaking with millions of viewers. But Joy Behar sat silent, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. So Tom, Whoopi began with genuine enthusiasm. Tell us about these incredible stunts we're seeing in the new Mission Impossible. I heard you actually learned to fly a helicopter for this one. Cruise's face lit up immediately, that trademark intensity shining through as he leaned forward in his chair. Whoopi, it was absolutely incredible. I spent months training with the best pilots in the world, learning every aspect of helicopter flight. When audiences see those sequences, they're seeing something real, something authentic. That's what I think people deserve. The audience was captivated, hanging on every word as Cruise described the death-defying sequences with the passion that had made him legendary. His hands moved animatedly as he painted the picture of the training, the preparation, the absolute commitment to giving viewers an experience they'd never forget. But throughout this animated discussion, Joy Behar had remained conspicuously silent. While the other hosts leaned in with genuine interest, Joy sat back in her chair, arms folded, watching Cruise with an expression that seemed to be calculating something. The contrast was stark. Everyone else was caught up in his infectious enthusiasm, but Joy looked like she was studying prey. Finally, after nearly 5 minutes of passionate storytelling, Joy leaned forward slightly. The shift in her posture was subtle, but it immediately changed the energy in the room. Cruise paused mid-sentence, noticing her movement, and the other hosts fell quiet. Tom, Joy said, her voice carrying an edge that cut through the warm atmosphere like a knife. I have to ask you about something that's been bothering me. All this talk about perfection and control. Don't you think there's something a little obsessive about your methods? I mean, some people in Hollywood are saying you're getting a reputation for being difficult to work with. The studio fell noticeably quieter. Cruise's smile remained, but something shifted behind his eyes. This wasn't the kind of question he'd been expecting. Cruise's trademark smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before returning, but the warmth had noticeably dimmed. He shifted slightly in his chair, his legendary intensity now turning defensive rather than enthusiastic. Joy, I think you might be misinformed about my process, he replied, his voice still controlled but carrying a new edge. What some people call difficult, I call dedicated. When you're responsible for $100 million production and the safety of an entire crew, attention to detail isn't obsessive, it's essential. Joy wasn't backing down. If anything, she seemed energized by his defensive response, leaning forward with the predatory focus of someone who had found their target's weak spot. But Tom, let's be honest here, she pressed, her voice taking on a sharper tone. We're hearing stories from sets about your need to control every single aspect of production. Some crew members have described working with you as intense to the point of being uncomfortable. Don't you think at some point this perfectionism crosses a line into something unhealthy? The other hosts exchanged nervous glances. This was clearly not the direction they had expected the interview to take. Sonny Hostin attempted a weak smile, as if trying to lighten the mood, but Joy's focus remained locked on Cruise like a laser beam. Cruise's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and his hands gripped the arms of his chair slightly tighter. The easy charm that had filled the studio moments before was rapidly evaporating, replaced by something much more guarded. Joy, I think you're completely mischaracterizing my work, he said, his voice now carrying a clear warning. Everything I do is about serving the story and protecting the people I work with. If that makes it difficult, then I guess I'm proud to be difficult. But Joy was just getting started, and the studio audience could sense that something was about to go very wrong. Joy's eyes glinted with something that looked almost like satisfaction as she prepared to deliver her next blow. The pretense of discussing his filmmaking had been completely abandoned now, and everyone in the studio could feel the shift from professional interview to something much more personal and dangerous. Tom, let's talk about what's really driving all of this, Joy said, her voice taking on a tone that made several audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Because I think there's something else we need to address here. Your involvement with Scientology. Don't you think that's affecting your judgment? Don't you think your association with that organization is influencing these obsessive behaviors we're seeing on your film sets? The question hit the studio like a bomb. The other host's eyes widened in shock, and even the cameraman seemed to freeze. This was the territory that everyone in Hollywood knew was off-limits, the subject that responsible journalists approached with extreme caution, if at all. Cruise's entire demeanor changed instantly. The defensive posture vanished, replaced by something much more intense and dangerous. His famous composure, built over decades of media training and professional experience, began to crack in real time. "Joy, I'm going to stop you right there," he said, his voice dropping to a lower register that carried an unmistakable menace. "My personal beliefs have absolutely nothing to do with my professional work, and they're certainly not appropriate topics for a promotional interview." But Joy had clearly decided that professional boundaries were irrelevant. She leaned forward even more aggressively, her voice rising with what seemed like righteous indignation. "Tom, when you use your massive platform to promote questionable organizations, when you're potentially influencing vulnerable people through your celebrity status, I think that becomes everyone's business. Don't you feel any responsibility for the impact of your public endorsements?" The temperature in the studio seemed to drop 10 degrees. Cruise's hands were now visibly. What happened next would go down as one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history. Joy's attack on his faith had crossed a line that even Tom Cruise's legendary professionalism couldn't tolerate, and the volcanic intensity that had made him famous was about to erupt in a way no one had ever seen before. "Joy, what you're doing right now is religious bigotry, plain and simple," Cruise fired back, his voice rising for the first time since he'd sat down. "You're attacking me for my personal beliefs because you think it makes for good television. That's not journalism. That's persecution." Joy's face flushed with anger, and she stood up from her chair, clearly relishing the confrontation she had successfully provoked. "Persecution? Tom, I'm asking legitimate questions about an organization that has been accused of abuse, manipulation, and destroying families. As someone with your influence, don't you think people deserve answers?" Cruise shot up from his chair as well, his famous intensity now transformed into barely controlled rage. The two of them faced each other across the panel like fighters in a ring, and the studio audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing something unprecedented. "You want to talk about destroying families?" Cruise's voice boomed through the studio. "How about what you're doing right now? How about using your platform to spread hatred and intolerance? You're not asking questions, Joy. You're conducting a witch hunt on national television." The other hosts were completely frozen, afraid to intervene in what had become a full-scale war. Producers were frantically signaling from behind the cameras, but both combatants were too locked in their battle to notice anything else. "A witch hunt?" Joy laughed bitterly, her voice cracking with indignation. "Tom, when you publicly endorse an organization that former members say traumatized them, when you use your fame to recruit people into something that has destroyed lives, asking questions about that isn't persecution. It's responsibility." The cameras continued rolling, capturing every second of the most uncomfortable confrontation in the View's history. The silence that followed Joy's accusation about recruitment and destroyed lives felt like it lasted forever. Cruise stood there, his chest rising and falling rapidly, his famous composure completely shattered. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet that everyone in the studio had to strain to hear him, but the words carried more menace than any shout could have managed. "Joy, you just crossed a line that you can never uncross," he said, his voice deadly calm. "You've moved from asking questions to making accusations about criminal behavior. You're accusing me of deliberately harming people based on nothing but your own prejudice and hatred." Joy sensed she had him on the ropes and decided to deliver what she thought would be the killing blow. "Tom, I'm not making accusations. I'm repeating what former members have said in court under oath. If you can't handle people questioning your involvement with a controversial organization, maybe you shouldn't be so public about promoting it." That was it. The moment that broke Tom Cruise's legendary control completely. "You know what, Joy?" he said, his voice now shaking with fury. "You're absolutely right about one thing. I can't handle this. I can't handle sitting here listening to someone spread lies and hatred about my faith. I can't handle being ambushed by someone who clearly has an agenda that has nothing to do with journalism. He began removing his microphone with swift, controlled movements, each action deliberate and final. Joy watched in growing panic as she realized her attack had backfired spectacularly. "Tom, don't you dare walk away from this," she called out desperately. "You can't just run when someone asks you hard questions about your choices." Cruise turned to face her one final time, and the look in his eyes was one of complete disgust. "Our questions? Joy, what you've done here today isn't journalism. It's character assassination, and I won't be a part of it for one more second." With that, Tom Cruise bolted from the set faster than anyone had ever seen him move, leaving Joy standing alone, still shouting after him as the studio doors slammed shut with earth-shaking finality. The silence that filled the View studio after Tom Cruise's explosive departure was unlike anything the crew had ever experienced. It was the kind of deafening quiet that follows a natural disaster, when everyone is still processing what they've just witnessed. The only sounds were the mechanical hum of the cameras still rolling and the barely audible whispers of stunned audience members trying to make sense of what had just happened. Joy stood there for several long seconds, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find words that simply didn't exist. When she finally spoke, her voice lacked its usual confidence, replaced by something that sounded almost like desperation. "Well," she said, attempting to regain some semblance of control, "I guess that tells us everything we need to know about Tom Cruise's ability to handle legitimate questions about his public influence and responsibilities." But even as she said the words, something in her expression suggested that she knew she had gone too far. The other hosts sat frozen in their chairs, clearly unsure whether to support their colleague or distance themselves from what had just transpired. Whoopi finally managed to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think we need to go to commercial," she said, but the damage was already done. The studio audience remained in shocked silence, many shaking their heads in disbelief at what they had witnessed. Some were pulling out their phones, already recording their reactions to what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked-about television moments of the year. The crew members exchanged bewildered glances, knowing they had just captured something that would be replayed and analyzed for decades to come. This wasn't just a bad interview. This was the moment when daytime television crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. What you just witnessed was more than an interview gone wrong. It was a masterclass in how quickly professional journalism can deteriorate into personal destruction when basic human decency is abandoned for the sake of viral content. The question now isn't whether Joy went too far. It's whether daytime television can ever recover from this moment. What do you think? Was this legitimate journalism or a calculated attack? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And that's how one of Hollywood's most professional and dedicated stars went from promotional guest to victim of a calculated ambush in less than 20 minutes. All because Joy Behar decided that attacking someone's personal faith was more important than conducting respectful journalism. Tom Cruise's bolt from that studio wasn't just a walkout. It was a statement about dignity, respect, and the boundaries that should never be crossed on national television. The question is, do you think Tom was justified in leaving, or should he have stayed and continued defending himself against Joy's relentless attacks? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure you subscribe for more incredible celebrity moments that expose the dark side of daytime television. Until next time, keep watching, and remember, sometimes walking away is the strongest thing you can do.